नमस्कार दर्शक मित्रों, थिंकलाइन के आज के नए संस्करण में आपका फिर से स्वागत है। टुडे वी आर गोइंग टू टॉक ऑन जियोपॉलिटिक्स, वर्ल्ड जियोपॉलिटिक्स एंड Narendra Modi's upcoming visit to Russia and Moscow. What are its consequences? Why that meeting comes up now? Why is it that Nancy Pelosi comes to India and before she could reach back to USA, it is announced? On one side, India seemed to be, gelling well with USA on certain aspects. But at the same time, age-old partner Russia has not been given up. So our basic strategy, India's basic strategy, seems to be nation first. And that is in true sense being witnessed. Talk all these things. We have, as you can see, Dr. Adityanjee with us. And he's going to tell us exactly where we are heading. And this change or changing world order, what is going to be India's position? Sir, we'll start with that because we are just a day ahead, because tomorrow he's going to be in Moscow. He's going to be talking to Vladimir Putin. And there is going to be US elections. Many people are raising their eyebrows. What's happening?
Well, what is happening is what should happen. I think if you look at international relations and contemporary geopolitics, we are seeing the world order in a very fluid dynamics. A hyperpower is slowly declining. The world is moving towards nascent multipolarity. A very confident India is exercising her strategic independence, has truly emerged as the ultimate balancer in any international equation. Mind you, as Bharat improved relationship with US over last 25 years and got into strategic partnership with United States, has a structured 2+2 dialogue with United States. Similarly, we have a strategic partnership with the Russian Federation. There's a structured 2+2 dialogue. And there was something else, icing on the cake. The head of the government of each country made an alternative annual visit to the other country.
Yes.
And that happened consistently. Last time Prime Minister Modi was in the Russian Federation was in 2019 in the city of Vladivostok. And I believe last time Vladimir Putin was in India was in 2021. He came for only a day instead of the usual 2 days, and that caused some consternation where the Russian Federation is downgrading India. There was some speculation. And it was turn of Mr. Modi to visit Russian Federation, and he did not. The relevant question is why he did not visit Russian Federation in 2022, or for that matter 2023. Why now? I think there's a lot of optics involved. In 2022, Russia had initiated a quote-unquote special military operation against Ukraine. And as an independent country, India didn't want to endorse that. India didn't want to condemn it, but India didn't want to endorse it. So the course was maintain some distance. And that continued 2023. In 2023, Mr. Putin did not come for G20.
Yes.
There were multiple reasons. It was not bilaterally significant issue. There are sanctions or criminal prosecution going on. Of course, India is not a signatory to that, so India was not obligated to arrest Mr. Putin, but it would have been not a pleasant picture for Mr. Putin, because he would have got a hostile reaction from rest of the world leaders. But India again balanced and did not invite Zelensky, who is not part of G20. In the year prior, in 2022, in Indonesia, Zelensky was invited to G20 and he hijacked the whole G20 agenda and meeting.
Yes.
So India has been on international arena making very prudent steps, making sure that Indian interests are safeguarded, making sure that we have good relations with all the major power players to the extent it is possible, without bending. So what is happening in 2024, that situation is changing. It is very clear that who is perpetuating the Ukraine war. I'm not going to go into that. And it is in India's interest to prepare for the future world, future geopolitical situation post-US election, which is going to be very fluid. We have seen a barrage of anti-India statements from Anthony Blinken, from USCIRF, even from the Commander-in-Chief of United States, that India is a xenophobic country. I think rather than getting into a debating match with mandarins of State Department or American politicians, what India is doing is making things happen on the ground and balancing the relationship with the Russian Federation is an important part. And it is a signal to rest of the world that India is not going to give up on India's fairly decent, fairly cordial relationship with Russia, although they have been irritants. I'm not saying everything is hunky-dory. I've talked about those irritants in the past, so I'm not going to repeat them. And we have some common mutual interests.
Yes.
We have common mutual interests. And in fact, in an article I wrote, can Bharat save Russia from the Chinese kiss of death?
Yes.
It came on my Council for Strategic Affairs website, I think in November of 2023. So in international arena, India has to make sure that Russia does not become a junior partner of communist China. And I think this visit will definitely be a step in the right direction, because there will be not only the strategic and military issues being discussed or agreements will be discussed, but also economic.
Yes.
Russia has a lot of cash in terms of Indian rupees. When the sanctions were placed on Russian Federation on oil export, India continued to buy. And India continued to buy, but the payment mechanisms were not very clear. So Russia has a lot of cash surplus in rupee term laying in Indian bank accounts, and they didn't know what to do with that.
That's been sorted out, does it? No.
That has been sorted out. So I think that there'll be further agreements what Russia can buy from India, made in India, goods, petrochemicals, medicines, luxury goods, consumable items and all that sort of thing. So there's one dimension to that has been sorted out, but that will be further enhanced.
Okay.
Other issue is our 5th generation aircraft.
Yes.
There was a setback on that. India withdrew because we paid the money and Russians were not willing to share the project details and all that sort of thing. So India sunk billions of dollars of money and then withdrew because Russian Federation was not being honest about it. So there's a possibility with Russia doing made in India, Atmanirbhar program, engaged with India in production of Su-57
Yes.
that has now been tried in Syria and other battlegrounds. So with more reliability, so that would definitely be there. S-500 and S-400 completion of the order, and possibly S-500, some collaboration on that would be definitely there. There would be something called RELAS, it is like mutual logistics exchange for military purposes. So that we have a number of countries, including United States. We have foundational agreements about mutual logistic support. So that agreement would we have with Japan, we have with Australia, we have with UK. So India, again, I am saying the ultimate balancer, India will have with Russian Federation also. India would not have with China or Pakistan, but with other friendly countries, India will have mutual military logistic support agreement because it becomes a win-win situation.
Are you just referring to, sir, I was along with that, what you said, at that, logistics agreement which took place between India and Russia.
Okay. So there is an irritant that needs to be resolved. And that irritant is deceptive recruitment of Indian citizens to fight in Ukraine. Now, one is not saying that is fault of the Russian Federation or that's fault of the individuals who volunteered or went for a quote-unquote job recruitment, but the message, the process was deceptive, crooked. Somebody in the process made money, whether these were the agencies that were doing recruitment, whether that was Russian government that did not disclose that they will not be in combat support roles, but in actually combat roles. So that issue needs to be sorted out. And of course, it is a message to United States, whoever becomes the president after the November elections, that India is not going to give up on the relationship with Russia just because we have good relationship with United States. There was a time when American diplomats used to tell Indian diplomats, whenever India complained about US support to Pakistan, that international relations are not zero-sum game. Now, Indian diplomats would be and should be telling United States, look, international relations are not zero-sum game. We can have good relations with United States and we will have good relations with Russia also. And you never know in future if China changes its attitude and resolves India's concerns and stops making hostile claims and vacates the adverse possession, we may have good relations with China also. We had civilizational relationship with both Tibet and China at one point in time. India was the guru in dharmic sense, and India can be dharmic guru for China again. There's no barriers to that, but China has to get its act together. China has imported a foreign ideology called communism and Marxism, which is not inherent to Chinese nation. They have to give it up and renounce all the, excessive, fantastic claims of, parts of other countries to have normal relationship. But that in nutshell is the situation at this point in time. So it will be the optics of Modi visit to Moscow, and it is probably 1.5 day visit because he's going to go to Austria also after this in the
Yes,
same visit.
Austria after this.
But it is definitely, sort of making the best of the opportunity, because you have to consolidate that relationship. In another paper, I had written about a new Quad, an anti-Quad Quad. So when India became active in Quad 3.0 in 2021, after Biden, became the president and assumed the presidency and gave some strategic importance to resurrection of Quad 3.0, the Russian Federation got very miffed. And if you remember, they started engaging and courting Pakistan. They said, we will sell helicopters and other equipment and hardware, military hardware to Pakistan. They were going to, make TAPI, gas pipeline, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, gas pipeline, a reality, and, have better relationship with Pakistan. So I talked about this anti-Quad Quad, that there was a new Quad emerging as a strategic relationship, which I called actually jocularly PRIC, PRIC, whatever it means otherwise, but PRIC stands for Pakistan, Russia, Iran, and China. So these countries were converging strategically. And I think one of the we already have a monkey on our back, nuclear Pakistan, created by China. So it is not in India's interest to get Iran also sucked into that orbit and have anti-India postures.
No, but then, sir, I have a question here.
Yes.
Just recently in SCO, for the first time, it was seen, that not Chinese, but the Soviet, Russian influence there. And Russia is partnering Pakistan in certain things, will supply them wheat. About the rail line, they are talking about Tajikistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. That certain things are happening, but that more of it, it looks like, it's something like sucking Pakistan in, because they are not forgetting that this, Tajik attackers on a Moscow attack were all trained in Pakistan by Pakistani ISI, which they know. And they remember, they don't forget that, Russians. And now Modi going there has a huge significance, because what I'm looking at the whole thing is, this 1.5 days, the way it was in 2021, 6 hours meeting between Putin and Modi brought about lots of things. This 1.5 days of Modi in Moscow could bring about a lot of things where so many people could be badly hurt.
Well, the meeting was called for. It is delayed by almost 2 years. So there would be a lot of issues to be sorted out in bilateral relationship. As far as engaging Russian Federation is concerned, India is a member of SCO. You have already talked about it. India is also part of an informal grouping that was initially envisaged by a Russian Prime Minister, Yevgeny Primakov, called RIC. And RIC meetings sometimes happen on the sides of SCO and other meetings. But Mr. Modi not going to SCO, it is also a signal, because India's application was pending. China did not allow it to be activated or India become active member till Pakistan was allowed there as a full member. So both India and Pakistan entered as full members of SCO. SCO has significance for India in terms of engaging Central Asian countries, and I would not discount it. But the messaging is that SCO at this point in time is not so important for India. because of the Chinese quote unquote sponsorship. SCO stands for Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and they were original Shanghai Five members, which had China, Russia, Tajikistan, and two other Central Asian countries. So that was the original Shanghai Five. So clearly, the sponsorship for SCO is from China. Unfortunately, China also has hijacked the BRICS agenda because of their dominant economy. So BRICS has now become G11 or G10, and China is maneuvering to bring Pakistan again into BRICS. So we have to sort of, play our cards, and it's important, as I said, that Bharat has to make sure that Russia does not get sucked into a junior partnership position with China. Yes, Indian and Chinese economies are asymmetric, but Indian economy is on ascendancy and Chinese economy is on decline at this point in time in terms of growth rates. Indian growth rate is around 7.5%. Chinese growth rate is going down to 4% or something like that. China has a massive amount of debt, external debt, internal debt. Their debt to GDP ratio is 287%. There are non-performing assets with the local banks, local councils, and local governments are kind of defaulting on their debts to the banks. So there's a demographic problem going on in China. There are not very many young people to work in Chinese factories. There is de-risking and decoupling going on from the Western world. Factories are being relocated from China in a process called offshoring or friendshoring, either to Malaysia, Vietnam, in some cases, very minimal cases to India, and largely to Mexico. So a lot is happening. And I think in that sense, those who think that Mr. Modi should stay home 365 days in a year do not realize that in international relations and geopolitics, you have to make personal connections. Sometimes leader to leader, head to head of the state to head of the state, or head of the government to head of government. Meetings are very essential. Personal chemistries are very essential. So for the domestic critics who say that immediately after becoming quote unquote one-third prime minister, having a minority government, he is going abroad. Well, he is the prime minister of the country. He has every right to go abroad and carry Indian banner, which is flying behind me, if you see in this picture. So Mr. Modi is carrying that to Russian Federation, and we have to do everything impossible to engage Russia to balance China and to maintain good relationship with the Western Alliance,
Okay.
Western
Now,
Five Alliance countries.
now, sir, I have a mood question, basic question. Some quarters seem to suggest that Modi's visit to Moscow is going to be important in bringing about the solution to Russia-Ukraine war. How realistically do you think it can happen?
I don't think it will happen. I don't think Mr. Modi will try to do that. There may be just general encouragement like this is not the era of the war. But Russia-Ukraine war is not Russia-Ukraine war.
Yes.
Ukraine is just the battlefield. It is Russia-NATO war that is happening. And till NATO decides, till the countries and the agencies that are running the NATO, till they decide that they don't want to burn more money and Ukrainian infrastructure, this is not going to stop. This war has not started in February of 2022. This war started much earlier. This started in 2014. This war started when Maidan Revolution was engineered and contrived. And the regime change agent of the State Department, I think, spent $5 billion to bribe the local politicians in Ukraine, to have a popular uprising against a duly elected president of Ukraine who was pro-Russia and was trying to actually cement relationship with Russia, Viktor Yanukovych, who was made to run away, flee these hoodlums as part of the Maidan Revolution. So this is a different war. The optics are different. It's not Ukraine-Russia war, although Ukraine is the Kurukshetra.
दर्शक मित्रों, आपने बहुत सही तरीके से सुना। ये यूक्रेन रशिया युद्ध जो चल रहा है ना, वो दो राष्ट्रों के बीच में नहीं है, वो रशिया और नेटो राष्ट्रों के बीच में है। यूक्रेन तो खाली कुरुक्षेत्र की युद्ध भूमि है जहां पर ये युद्ध लड़ा जा रहा है। अब इसी के साथ जुड़ा हुआ, सी सर, माय लास्ट क्वेश्चन नाउ, related to this. I asked this question first and then now I'm coming to something else. How much does the Western world get hurt if India's proximity to Russia increases? Or how angry would they be? Because they've tried everything in this election. They've tried all their might in this election to dislodge Modi, which they've not been able to do so. Now it's US elections, and now this UK new Prime Minister-elect is making overtures that we want good relations with India. Will that happen? I don't think, with the Labour, Modi government will settle. But that's beside. More importantly, United States election, and after that, how hurt this Western civilization will be.
When we talk about Western alliance, it is led by United States, and UK is an important part of this alliance intellectually, because they were the former superpower and they gave the mantle to USA, so they have a disproportionate influence on the US government. I agree that Labour governments are generally not so favorable to India because of their support of jihadi terrorism, their support for, Kashmiri, quote-unquote, terrorists and Khalistani terrorists. Having said that, all the initial overtures from Sir Keir Starmer are very conciliatory. This is a person with very humble background, very humble background. He follows some of Indic dharmic principles.
Yeah.
His wife and he are both vegetarians, and they are very favorably inclined towards India. So you understand that as the Prime Minister of the country with a almost 2/3 majority, he may not do anything that will in long term affect India-UK bilateral relationship, and he may manage, quote unquote, these jihadi elements within his own country. So that is one aspect of it. The Western alliance has to grow up and get used to India's presence, India's independent stature, and they are learning to do that. It's not a question of how much their interest would be hurt. They will learn to live within India, a resurgent India, as others are doing. I can tell you there is pragmatism and realism now in some of the Western commentators, some of the think tanks which are state-supported, like RAND Corporation. Some of the analysts, if you see their writing, understand where India is coming from. In fact, there was a paper or interview by a Pentagon, military person saying that we know India is going to become a great power. It will not be a superpower, it will be a great power. We'll continue to have good relations with India, but India will never be our ally. So they understand, India is not a treaty partner, is not a treaty-bound ally. India is not member of NATO. India will never sign any agreement with any country that, leads to quote unquote a military alliance. Yes, partnership, friendship, strategic partnership, those are all fine. So there's begrudging acceptance of de facto emergence of India as an ultimate independent balancer in a gradually evolving multipolar world. And Western Alliance knows that, know that they need India's cooperation because there is no solution of an international problem that is possible without India's participation. So India is an essential part of any solution to any international problem, as we demonstrated in Wuhan virus epidemic or Wuhan virus pandemic. The vaccine Maitri Abhiyan was, appreciated by so many countries of the global south who went on to appreciate Bharat's role in that. So any new initiative that is coming, Bharat or India has a definite role. Western Alliance knows that. And let me be very frank and brutal about it. India is too big to be managed by Western bureaucrats. You cannot actually make India bend. India has witnessed waves and waves of sanctions and India still survived. And now it's a resurgent, it's a confident India, whatever the naysayers may say domestically, from being 10th largest economy in 2014 in terms of GDP, India is now 5th largest economy in terms of nominal GDP. In terms of purchasing power, India is third largest economy in terms of purchasing power GDP. We have displaced UK from the 5th position. UK is 6th. And yes, eventually India is going to become the third largest in terms of nominal dollar terms. So nobody in their sane minds can question India's posturing, India's role. They have to learn to live with India's positions.
One last question, sir. We have not much time, couple of minutes only. One last question. What will be the biggest takeaway of this Vladimir Putin, Narendra Damodar Das Modi meeting of tomorrow?
I think instead of sort of counting the beans and, about defense cooperation or this deal or that deal, 5th generation fighter aircrafts and all, I think it's right sizing the bilateral relationship. The drift had come because of this unfortunate war, and there were some mutual suspicions. I can again bring that particular issue. On the on the future of Afghanistan, there was a meeting that was sponsored by Russian Federation, I think in one of the Central Asian countries. I think it was somewhere in Tajikistan, Astana, or wherever, in collaboration with Pakistan, and India was not invited. And at that time, this was pre-Ukraine war. This at that time, a very arrogant Sergei Lavrov had refused to engage with India's emissaries. So there is a lot of history. Yes, we have a cordial relationship, but they have been bilateral irritants because of China, Pakistan meddling and politics. So time has to come, right size the relationship and send future messages, virtue signal to the Western Alliance, to China, and to Russian Federation itself, that you need to take India seriously, Indian interests seriously, and it should be a win-win situation for both Russia as well as Bharat. If we can normalize the relationship, remove all the irritants, you have to be honest within India. If you want to have a bilateral production of a fighter plane of future generation, you cannot just take the money and not involve Indian engineers into the planning and share the data. So there are a lot of things. Again, I would say that it's not in terms of counting beans that India will get this or India will get that. It's overall the trajectory of the relationship, because Russia also has to realize that, as I said, India has a role in saving Russia from embrace of China, Chinese kiss of death. China will slowly gobble up Russia's Far East. China has a claim on Russia's Far East. Russia knows that. China has a claim, undeclared claim on port city of Vladivostok. So let it be clear that it is in Russia's interest to maintain cordial relations, to maintain strategic partnership with India, not antagonize India, and nurture this relationship so that it is a win-win situation. We can do a lot of export of goods to Russia that China is supplying.
दर्शक मतलब आपने सुना, win-win relationship for both. That is what is going to be, भारत रशिया एंगेजमेंट. और उसको नेक्स्ट लेवल पे ले जाने के लिए बहुत काम करना होगा. You have to work tremendously to take it to the next level. But as the trade says, the Indo-Russian trade, which is soaring now, it's going up, and it will keep going up. And Russian investments in India is also going to increase. And don't forget, my friends, today, Bharat is the single most biggest buyer of Russian crude. Today, आज भारत जो भी क्रूड ऑयल इंपोर्ट करता है, उसमें का 42% is Russian. Don't forget that.
I think it makes geopolitical sense. They are near us, and there's no reason why India should bow down to the Western alliance expectation. So that will continue. That's a commodity. India is rich in its economic plans, and that creates a hunger for energy.
Yes.
And wherever we can get energy resources, so be it. We are not going to say that, Mr. Biden doesn't like India buying Russian oil. It doesn't work like that. Too bad.
Mr. Biden likes it or not, Mr. Trump likes it or not, India will continue to buy crude oil from Russia. That is, in a sense, nation first theory. And let me tell you something, those. This is going to be very interesting times. From July to December, international geopolitics is going to be very, very interesting, and we'll make sure that every week we bring you actually what is happening in the world, geopolitical sense. तो मित्रों, आज के लिए तो सिर्फ इतना ही. आपको गुजारिश है, मैंने आज अभी तक नहीं बोला, please like, share and subscribe our videos. And if you want to contribute, you have the details in the description. You can do it so whichever way you like. But please do help us. And don't forget to subscribe and like and share. Before we go, Dr. Adityanjee, one last comment for you.
I think this is India's time, India's opportunity on the world stage. We have to capitalize on every opportunity to make sure that Indian tricolor flies everywhere. India is respected. India is appreciated. Our role is appreciated, and we get good name for our good deeds all over the world. So we have to have cordial relationships with all the countries in the world. Yes, we'll have friendship with all of you within the parameters. And it does not mean that we'll be ganging up against one country or the other country. We will be dictated by one alliance or the other military alliance. We will maintain our own posture. We will stand with a straight spine. That should be India's message. to rest of the world, and that would be the message to our adversaries also, whether that is China or Pakistan. Without mincing words, without using unparliamentary language, India will guard the interests of India, period.
दर्शक मित्रों, बस इसी शब्दों के साथ इंडिया विल गार्ड इट्स इंटरेस्ट फर्स्ट। नमस्कार दर्शक मित्रों, आज के लिए बस इतना ही, फिर मिलेंगे। थैंक यू वेरी मच डॉक्टर आदित्य जी, विल मीट अगेन।
धन्यवाद हिमांशु जी, मैं आपका आभारी हूं कि आपने मुझे अपने मंच पर निमंत्रित किया।